All right. Hi. It's always so solemn before we start. It's always like, it's like a viewing, you know, like you get that funeral home vibe, you know, that kind of like, sort of like, he looks good, yeah. So sorry. Thanks for coming down. My name is George Hrab. I'm going to do a little brief sort of presentation for you guys, talking about talking with people that might happen to believe that the Earth is much younger than it actually is, or than, wow, dude, I haven't seen you in what, 3 years? My gosh. Wow. How's the prison sentence, all right? Parole's good? Yeah. Awesome. Sweet. I was asked a couple years ago at DragonCon, which is a festival that happens down in Atlanta, Georgia, to do a lecture mistakenly. I'm a musician, so I should say that right out of the gate, even though I've been talking for 2 minutes already. But right out of the gate, I'm a musician. I'm not a scientist. I'm a fan of science. I play drums for a living. So if you want to leave right now, that's totally cool. My URL is geologicrecords.net because that's my little faux record company. It's called Geologic Records because I have, well, the whole family's here. Awesome. So I think one of the organizers saw my link information and it said Geologic Records. And they thought, oh, this guy's a geologist. Would you like to do a lecture about how we know the Earth is older than 6,000 years? And my initial reaction was, I'm a drummer. And I thought, well, wait a minute. Maybe this would be a good opportunity to try to do something as a fan of science, not necessarily one who is a schooled scientist, but one who just enjoys science. One who, like I'm sure many of you, sat and watched every episode of Cosmos religiously. That was like going to church for me. That was my dad and I, we sat and watched Cosmos, and that was awesome. And half of it I didn't understand, and it didn't matter because the other half that I did understand, affected me in a big way. So I thought, all right, how does a layman drummer from Pennsylvania with an unfortunate URL do a talk about how we know the Earth is older than 6,000 years? 6,000 years is kind of the standard measurement that's used because of this guy, Bishop Ussher. I don't know if you know the whole Bishop Ussher story. Bishop Ussher was a guy, I guess in the 40s or 50s, I guess. I'm not even sure, maybe 30s or 40s. He figured out...
No, it was back like in the 16th century.
Oh, is that old? Oh, okay. All right, so it's way back. We can trade spots at any point if you want. It'd be totally cool. No, there's going to be chock full of errors here, just so you know. But the overreaching idea will be very, very incisive and good. The Bishop Ussher, now that you sort of say that, from way back, figured out all the begats and all of the sort of chronology of the Bible, and to his best estimation, sort of figured out that the Earth was created in 4004 BC, like on a Tuesday, literally. Like he said, it was like 6:25 on a Tuesday. Just like, yeah.
You had the month as well.
October, I think it was October, right? Yeah, October, and and the time, right. So it's perfect. That's exactly, yeah. Because daylight savings and whatever, creation savings time, I'm not sure how that exactly works, but anyway. So that's kind of the standard number that's used based on Bishop Ussher's calculations. Now, the main problem with this is that number of 6,000 years is so wrong, it's not even wrong. To compare, I mean, it's comparing apples to brake fluid. It's so horrendously wrong. And yet, arguments happen all the time. Now, the standard way that you can argue that things are older than 6,000 years is through carbon dating. Now, radiometric dating. Now, carbon is in all living things, and carbon decays at a very consistent rate, and we can measure this decay and figure out how old things are. This works, I think it's like to 50, 60,000 years or so. So right there, the 6,000 years is done. But I don't want to talk about carbon dating because people that don't believe in carbon dating, which also is like, I don't believe in gravity. I don't believe in the theory of gravity or the theory of flight or the theory of music. It's like, okay. People will note anomalies that are within carbon dating, and they'll say that it's useless. So I don't want to talk about carbon dating, but I do want to list a bunch of other things that you can use if you do have to talk about this with someone, if you do have to, and you know, I called this how to calmly debate without strangling the cat. The problem is you will never, ever, ever, ever convince a true believer to change their mind. It will not happen. It will not happen with your conversation. It might happen over time, but a single conversation or a single gotcha fact will never change a true believer's mind. What I like to focus on are the people who know the true believers. Those that might be sort of on the fence that come to me or come to you and sort of say, I have this cousin that said that this is what the thing is, and is that like this Bishop Usher guy, is that really what the deal is? Because that's, I mean, part of it sounds interesting and sort of possible. That's the person you want to talk to. Because the cousin that believes in it is going to make all kinds of amendments, all kinds of excuses, and is going to point to the anomalies. You know, one anomaly does not destroy a theory necessarily. 100 anomalies don't destroy a theory. If there's millions of examples, if there's billions of examples of something being one way, and there's a couple anomalies, those anomalies don't necessarily destroy the fact of the billions of examples. So what I want to focus on are just a couple little things here. Maybe we can get some questions to at some point if you'd like. So apart from carbon dating, which is the obvious answer, light, the way light travels around the universe, it's a measurable thing. The speed of light, the relative speed that light travels in. Your cell phones wouldn't work. Your satellite radio wouldn't work. Your GPS systems wouldn't work. One of the coolest little nerd facts that just fills my heart with chocolate is the idea that they have to, with satellites, they have to take into account relativistic effects because they're traveling so fast. And you know the idea of relativity, that the faster you travel, the slower your time is, okay, which in and itself just is a complete taint kick. You know what I mean? So they have to actually calculate and add into satellites. Okay, if this satellite is traveling at 20,000 miles an hour, we have to add these relativistic changes because its time is going slower. And if we didn't adjust for it, then your GPS wouldn't work. So that's how precise scientists are in terms of knowing the properties of light and how it works. So there are portions of our galaxy that are like 50,000 light years away. It's totally visible, but they're 50,000 light years away. For that light to get to us, for us to be able to see it, has to travel that distance, has to take that much time to travel that much distance. We can tell whether it's a redshift or a blue shift. Redshifts are, you know, when things are moving towards you, they redshift, away. When things are moving away from you, again, thank you. When they move away from you, it's a redshift. When they move towards you, it's a blue shift. And that's all measurable. All this stuff is measurable by people way smarter than me. And way smarter than probably most of us, but not you. Which is fine. For this light to exist and travel that distance, the universe has to be older than 6,000 years, like right there. Now some will say, what's that?
There's an exception to that the universe was created with an existing history.
Exactly, yeah. Now, I was just going to actually make up that point. That's the tricky God, yeah, the sly, tricky God who has nothing better to do. The idea that, yes, the universe is created with light appearing to look like it's been traveling, or fossils appearing in the record. You know, he just creates the Earth with these fossils to sort of test us. Now, if that's true, if someone's going to use that as an argument, I always say, okay, if that's your argument, then you could argue that the universe was created 30 seconds ago with all of our memories, all of our personality, all of our history completely intact, and you could never, ever, ever prove that wrong. So it's pointless. It's pointless to make that, to use that as an argument. Because if that's true, then the other is just as true. And before, I mean, this room could have been created 25 seconds ago. So that argument, yeah, it's a clever attempt, but it's like swing and a miss. So, because that can be true of anything, you know?
You raise that one. The only real proof you say about it is that the universe will be created before I die.
Before what?
Before I die.
Before you die, yes. Well, one can only hope, yeah. So there's light. Light is a great, the properties of light we know all about, and it's got to travel these massive distances. I mean, just massive distances. Have you seen the, the deep space photo? You know, they found a dark spot on the Hubble array that had nothing in it, and they decided to focus on that for, I think it was, a couple weeks. And the amount of shit that they found in this dark spot of nothing was just mind-numbing at how much stuff is out there and how far away it is. All right, so there's light. Plate tectonics. Plate tectonics, it's the slow, basically you have this molten ball of really hot jello that has this crust on top of it that moves. Plates form mountains like that. The Himalayas are formed very slowly over time because plates are moving. You see the way the continents all kind of fit into each other when they went back. I always thought it was called Pangaea, which I thought was a much cooler thing, but it's Pangea, I guess, which I like Pangaea. It sounds like a 50s singer or something, yeah, like Fred Pangaea. I just like that, but it's Pangea, I guess. For years I said Pangaea. So you have Pangea, and Pangea just basically just sort of spreads out and moves across the Earth at a very calculable rate. And we see that continents collide and rub together and then separate. And all this stuff is completely measurable within the geographic record, the geologic record. And again, if this is just being done to test us, then it's just annoying. So what is it? The Himalayas, Himalayas form, the peak of the Himalayas moves about 3 inches per year for the last 100,000 years. So it's this slow movement, 3 inches a year, So for the Himalayas to exist, we have to be older than 6,000 years. We just have to. That's another great example of one of these theories that was thought to be bunk, plate tectonics, when this was originally like in the 50s and 60s, I guess 50s, not 1450s, but the 50s and 60s, when it was proposed, people would say, these continents look like they fit together, but they actually don't.
Actually, it was 19th century.
19th century was the initial thing? Dude, you were just going to have a seat right up here, man. I love it. And it turns out, wow, oh, no, that is what's going on. Okay, cool. The continental drift thing is actually, that's what's happening. And so a new paradigm was formed, and that was what was accepted. It's one of those great examples, where they say science is so hard-minded and science never changes its mind. And it's like, well, science changes its mind all the time. It just has to have that thing, what do you call, proof? Yeah, evidence, exactly. And it'll gladly do it. Okay, so we've got light, we've got plate tectonics. We go coral reefs. This is a really cool one. Coral reefs? Steve Reeves, coral reefs. Coral reefs, who was my favorite Superman, by the way. I want to say reefs, because I want to say Pangaea, too. Coral reefing they grow, it takes 100 years to produce a couple inches of growth, and there are some reefs that are like 4,000 feet thick. So again, this growth of these reefs is a very measurable thing. And even if the measurements were, even if the rate of growth on these reefs was off by hundreds of percent, it still would mean that the Earth is older than 6,000 years. So that's how wrong that 6,000 year number is. Coral reefs do that for a while. There's another thing called loess deposits, which are really cool. Loess deposits are like this really, really fine silt dirt kind of stuff that basically gets blown into mountains or sort of blown into cliff faces. And there's like in China, there's these amazing loess deposits. And what's the rate on this? They're like 300 meters thick, and you can actually go back millions of years within these loess deposits. You can see how they've developed. Again, if the measurement on these things it would have to be so wrong that it's mind-numbing how wrong it would be for that to actually take 6,000 years, the rate at which it would occur. I love this next one, Dendrochronology, only because it's got the coolest name, which is the measuring of tree growth, the rings of trees, right? Like everyone knows, you slice a tree just for fun, and you count the rings. They do it with core samples. But so, okay, well, how do we know that it's thousands of years? Because there aren't trees that are 6,000, 10,000 years old. Well, actually, there are. There are these bristlecone pines in northern California. Some of them have been traced back to 7,000 BC. Which is so cool. I mean, like... Yeah, right, yeah. Cut that sucker down, man. Vupa, vupa. Yeah, no, they do little core samples where they use these neat... I don't know if they do it on the bristlecones because they're tiny, but you can essentially find the rings. And what's neat is They do this other thing in European homes that are made of wood from like 14th and 15th century homes that were using wood at the time that might have been 800, 1,000 years old. What they do is they go and they find matching portions. Because, you know, the rings are formed when it rains a lot, you'll get a thicker ring. If there's a drought, you'll have a shorter distance between the rings. If there's a fire, all this stuff is sort of revealed within the rings of a tree. So what they do is they can match up pieces of board that were cut from the same tree, and they can extend the timeline. And you can even go from home to home, because you will find, like, okay, we're looking for drought, drought, fire, rain, drought. And then they go to the house. They're looking at drought, fire, drought. No, okay, drought, fire, fire, no. Drought, drought, fire, drought, rain. That's it. Okay, so we'll connect these two pieces together, and now we have this many more years. And they do that for all these pieces, and they can go back thousands of years. Tree growth. I mean, again, like, how are you going to argue unless the rate at which tree rings grow was significantly different in the first 1,000 years of the planet? It just doesn't make any sense. I love that one. That one's really cool. So you go back to 7,000 BC with the bristlecone, which is 9,000 years, right there, 9,000. So the 6,000's done. Varves, which is another great thing. It's algae growths that happen on these large lakes. You get an algae bloom forms when the sun is out and everything's nice and warm and happy, and this algae bloom covers the top of the lake, and then winter comes, and the thing dies, and it sinks to the bottom. Boom. And then it happens again. Algae bloom, whoop, and it sinks to the bottom. And these things, there's a lake in Japan, Lake Suigetsu, which has 45,000 layers. So if it takes a year per layer, that's 45,000 years. You know, just like of muck measurements. That's so cool. You know, but it's undeniable. What are we doing here? Rolling through. Moondust. Moondust is another cool one. There's this sort of piz that floats about and that lands on things, especially things like the moon, that don't have any kind of weather systems to disrupt it. So this moondust, it was calculated that the amount of moondust, which is kind of prevalent in our solar system, not moondust, but sort of space dust, should accumulate on the moon. They were calculating that 2 nanograms per square centimeter. So a nanogram is 1,000th of a millionth of a gram, right? Okay? Yeah. 2 nanograms per square. A nanogram is 1,000th of a millionth of a gram. That's a very tiny amount. So this is sort of, what's that? 10 to the minus 9. Sure. Of a gram. Okay, 10 to the minus 9 of a gram. Yeah, so tiny, effing tiny. Yeah. Normally the number of people that come to my gigs, like small, okay? So they estimated there should be about 1.5 inches of moon dust. If the moon was 4.5 billion years old, approximately, which they figured it should be, there should be about 1.5 inches of moon dust. And guess what? There's 1.5 inches of moon dust. Cool. There's no other way it could have gotten there except from space piz, you know, sort of, which is the technical term. Yeah, I know. Falling on it, you know. Again, for me, like as a complete non-scientist, it's just, that is so neat and so cool.
How do we measure that?
When the guys landed, apparently. Oh, that's right. Yeah, we never landed on the moon. Sorry, yes. That's right. Duh. Well, in the studio, they had about 1.5 inches. And they were just sort of doing this. Yeah. Regolith. That's the word, right? Another great word, right? It's like another good band name. Regolith and Dendrochronology. Dendrochronology would be a tough band name, but Regolith would be cool, like the Sons of Regolith, you know? Phil Plait and the Sons of Regolith. It would be like, yeah, it'd be a cool band. Helioseismology, study of the sun, right? So as suns burn off their fuel, they start off with hydrogen because that's the most abundant thing, and it's burning hydrogen. Boom, 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 boom. Once it starts running out of hydrogen, it starts burning helium. Now, when it starts burning helium, sound travels through helium differently than it travels through hydrogen. So what you do is you essentially listen to a solar storm, and you can tell by the sort of sounds that there's more helium than there was to the previous solar storm that you listened to, and that's how you can measure the rate at which the hydrogen is sort of being replaced by helium. Through audio, okay? Again, completely measurable. So when they do this, as sunquakes occur, the difference in sound can be measured, observed, and calculated, and then you can determine the star's age. So they say the sun's about 4.6 billion years old by determining this rate, which again, this is like nuclear fuel. So this is a very steady kind of process. When you're dealing with sort of things that happen on that scale with nuclear properties, it's very steady. I mean, it's like a cesium clock. You know, that's what they use. The decay of a cesium atom is what you use to coordinate your nuclear clocks. You know.
That was regolith's first album, by the way.
Yes, regolith's first album was Cesium Clock. Yes, awesome, awesome. Well, that's that thing where they took, again, back to the relativistic aspects of time and space. They took two clocks that were synchronized, that were based on the decay of cesium atoms, two atomic clocks. They put one on a 747 and flew it around for a while at whatever, 700 miles an hour, 900 miles an hour, and they landed and they checked the two clocks, and the one that had been traveling 900 miles an hour was behind the one that stayed on the ground. Like, I mean, it's real. That's real, absolute real thing, which is undebatable. Really, really cool stuff. Okay, so helioseismology. Now, there's a couple other neat sort of things, again, apart from carbon dating and some of the things I just mentioned. There are certain events that have happened on the planet that if humanity was around, if we indeed have been around since the garden and it's 6,000 years old, there should be some kind of record of it. In some culture, there should be some record. Like, for instance, meteor impacts, massive meteor impacts. Okay, like there is in the Yucatan, which is thought to be the Cretaceous killing meteor, the thing that landed, boom, in the Yucatan, threw up all the dust and killed the dinosaurs. I mean, there's that layer of, oh, what's the element that's iridium? Awesome, my people. Oh, I love it. There's a layer of iridium that was thrown up and basically thrown up into the thing and landed on the Earth, and they can kind of see it. Oh, yeah, there's this layer of iridium which happened 65 million years ago, give or take a day or two. And it's evidence of this impact crater. Now, this impact was so massive. I mean, so massive. It was like big enough to kill dinosaurs, you know? If there were a culture that existed at the time of this, it would be in their record on some level. You know, it would be somewhere in the story. There's another one, supervolcanoes. Okay? The Toba caldera in Sumatra, 74,000 years ago, threw up more than 3,000 times the ash that Mount St. Helens threw up. Yes, a witness was there.
Everybody knows the dinosaurs died in the flood.
That's, yeah.
People had the records about the meteor impact in the Yucatan.
Right. Oh, so they died as well. Oh, I got you. Yeah, because they were killed in the flood. All right, he's right. That's it.
How do you argue that?
At the bottom of a silt pond or something.
Right.
Or there are clay tablets that dissolved anyway.
Or the ark landed on top of their library and broke it all.
Right. You know, and it's like you can say that, and we laugh and we chuckle at it, but like there are people that spend crazy amounts of money doing explorations, like going to Ararat and trying to find the Ark. You know, and it's like crazy amounts of money.
Well, they have run into a problem there.
Oh, really?
Recently, there was discovered in the mountains, a temple of Vern as being dated to around between 9,500 years ago to 11,500.
Oh, they found like a structure.
Yeah,
Oh,
a very large structure.
see, science will fuck you every time. I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah. Again, you know. Again, it's so wrong. It's not even wrong. It's so wrong. It's okay. Yeah. The reason that there's no witnesses to the dinosaur killing event is because they all died in the flood. Like so you sort of you can't to try to argue that to a certain degree is it's almost I don't want to say pointless, but you have to sort of reflect that to the person that says that and sort of say, now, like what does that mean? What are the implications of that really, if you think about it? You know, how does that affect everything else? Like, because it's this idea that, you know, if that's right, if the geologic record incorrect, that means that certain aspects of chemistry are going to be incorrect. And if certain aspects of chemistry are incorrect, that means that like physics is going to be incorrect. And if physics is incorrect, that means that like math is incorrect. And if math is incorrect, what are we doing? You know what I mean? It really is a house of cards, you know? And that's another great...
evidence of a flood, a planetary-wide flood.
What's that?
Wouldn't that leave a footprint there of planetary-wide?
You would think, yeah, right. You would think. Where did the water go? And yeah, the heavens opened up. And all, yeah. Again, but you can say that, and they will give you a read. They will tell you, you know, yeah, it was. What's that?
The Grand Canyon.
Well, I was going to get to the Grand Canyon. Yeah, they sort of say that the Grand Canyon was, you know, formed in this massive flood, you know, because you know how easy it is to get half a mile of rock to disappear, you know, like that, you know. Whereas they've done experiments where they've done simulations trying to see, okay, how do we form something that has strata that looks like the Grand Canyon? And if you do a violent rushing and a destructive flood that supposedly comes in and does it in one fell swoop, you don't get that slow kind of layered thing that is what you have with the Grand Canyon, which is done because a river slowly carved into it over time. So these volcanoes, these major meteor impacts, none of this stuff exists in any kind of record. And what's cool is there are examples of, there were monks that witnessed they're not sure if it's a supernova or a GRB or something, yeah. There was that. It was a moon collision which happened, yeah. And I think...
Created one of the Marias.
Okay. That was 15th century too, right? 14th century? Something like that. Anyway, there is a record of like people seeing cool shit and being like, whoa, what is that? Trying to explain it as some kind of, you know, supernatural thing. And you go, oh, well, actually that happens to line up with this, that we know there was a meteor impact, or we know there was an eclipse, or we know there was a supernova, or whatever it was. So there are records of this stuff. Even though they wouldn't know what's going on, they'd be able to recount it on some level.
It's like the Star of Bethlehem.
Well, yeah, that's another one, because it's like, there's a couple different theories on that, right? That's a supernova, but then it's like, what year did it happen? Because if Christ is born 3 AD or not, it's like this whole, what's that great story? Isn't there a great story where, yes, there is, definitely. Arthur C. Clarke, yeah, where the Star of Bethlehem like destroyed the civilization so that like they could follow it. It's really cool. Anyway, what's that called? You didn't tell me that? The Star?
The Star.
Oh,
The Star.
Good name. I live in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, by the way. So any reference to, we have a star actually on this mountain top that's with light bulbs. They have this massive, like 7-story star, which there's zoning laws which say you can't build too close to it because it has to look like it's floating. So there's no other lights next to it. You sort of stand on the Lehigh Valley and you look at this thing, and especially when it's sort of foggy or whatever. It's really cool. And the thing is, it was built in the 60s, so the light bulbs they used were very specific of the time, and the company that made the light bulbs was going out of business. So apparently they went down there like in 1980 and bought like 6 million light bulbs. Just 'cause they figured it'd be cheaper than rebuilding the whole structure. They would just buy out the company's like stock of light bulbs. Anyway. Ice ages. That's another great one. Talk about proof. There's been about 20 ice ages where these massive ice sheets tear down the coast of any continent and then right back up, and this takes a long time. And there's evidence of this. There's evidence that you see this massive grinding that happens. For there to be 20 ice ages within the span of 6,000 years, it would be like watching a river flow, but it would be this massive wall of ice of just like, coming across and then disappearing, and then coming across and disappearing. And it just didn't happen that way. Hawaii shouldn't be able to exist because Hawaii basically is slow volcanic release. Any kind of Pacific island, for the most part, are these little volcanic tips that take a lot of time. There's no way that 6,000 years is enough time for Hawaii to form and have Dog the Bounty Hunter on it. There's just no way. Coal, again, if it's formed in situ, it goes to that idea of, well, it can't just form. If he creates the earth with coal in it, then he can just create us an hour ago. But it takes thousands of years for vegetation and all kinds of crap and dead dinosaurs and stuff to basically form into coal.
Well, if God did it, then the Irish are really angry because he gets it.
Yes, well, but they got the Scotch, though, so it's 6-1. Salt deposits in Utah. There's this underground deposit of salt that's been left from a slow evaporation of an ancient sea. An ancient sea used to be where Utah was, and there's a slow evaporation that has happened. There's 6,000 years is not enough time for that to exist. The Grand Canyon, we talked about that. And then ice cores. This is another great one. You know, you go to the Antarctic and you pull out these ice cores, and you can get tens of thousands of years of record of CO2 levels, of oxygen levels, of nitrogen levels, all kinds of stuff that was within the atmosphere. It's all in the same way that those varves would kind of settle. You'd have the same idea with these ice sheets where it would be the slow settling, and whatever particulates or whatever ratios of gases were in the atmosphere, it would freeze in that layer. And they pull out these massive core samples because Antarctica, in essence, is untouched, you know, for thousands and thousands of years. You wouldn't have those kind of core samples be possible if the Earth was less than 6,000 years. Those are sort of the ones that I found and came up with. Now, again, it's really difficult to convince someone that believes. I find a really good thing to do sometimes is to sort of just take a step back if someone is spouting some kind of a scientific belief with huge ironic quotes around it, to let them sort of hang themselves. The best thing I like to say often is, really? How does that work? Where someone will say, God created, you know, the thing with you know, light traveling already to make it look like it's a blue shift. And you go, okay, so like how does that work? Is that a trust issue? Like what's there? Or yeah, Mount Ararat has the ark on. Okay, now really, so how honestly, how big would this ark have to be to have about 5 million species on it that wouldn't eat each other? And like, where did all the shit go? You know what I mean? Like, you know, like that kind of stuff. So like that's sort of the approach that I like to take. What I don't like to do is to there is a point where you have to dismiss someone because if you have to walk away at some point. But very often I've had really interesting conversations with people that are complete believers. At DragonCon last year, I had a conversation with these two Christians that we were ready. We were the poster. You know, we were that Marquis de Queensberry Rules poster, and we ended up having this lovely 45-minute conversation where they played against the cliche that I expected them to play into, which was just Bible spouting, and I played against the cliche that I wasn't eating an actual baby, you know, while they were talking to me. No, that, you know, I knew a lot of the biblical passages they were talking about. I knew a lot of the references they were going to be making and tried to kind of head them off at the pass. And we had this really cool conversation. That's another great thing is know as much as you possibly can about the opposing side's arguments or ideas, you know?
Like asking the source, which version of the Bible would translate.
Absolutely. Read the Bible. I mean, read the Bible and memorize stuff because nothing, you know, I remember being on a boardwalk once and this guy came up and he said, you know John 3:16? And I said, sure, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. He was like, I said, are you a Christian? I said, no, I'm an atheist. And it was like, but it established kind of the precedent, and then we had a really cool conversation, you know, because he couldn't fathom. And I, you know, as an atheist, had an opportunity to portray myself as something contrary to what he thinks or she thinks an atheist is. And when I ended that conversation in Atlanta, this last one with the two kids, I said, you know, next time you're in your church group or whatever, and the subject of an atheist or atheism comes up, or science or non-belief comes up, and someone starts saying, oh, well, all atheists are X. Like, take a second and say, well, I met one guy who actually was nice and we had a decent conversation. So there's at least one. And conversely, I'm telling you guys now that these guys were not a cliched, Bible-thumping, you know, fingers in their ears kind of. They were very smart guys. They were very articulate. This one guy, he loved Dimitri Martin, who's a comic that I love as well. So we talked about Dimitri Martin. I mean, why should this like super Christian from Atlanta like Dimitri Martin? You know, mostly because he doesn't curse. You know, and he was allowed to watch him, so he liked him. But like I love Dimitri Martin, so we had this connection. So I said, you know, I will represent you guys as well as I can if someone says all Christians are X. And hopefully you'll be able to represent me if someone says all atheists are X. So, are there any questions while we're here? We have a little bit of time left.
Any other logical conundrum you can throw back at them other than God created the universe with so many misleading comments?
Right.
Then why not 2 seconds ago? What other ones exist?
What other ones exist? You know what?
Well, I mean, if it's a constant test of faith and a constant test of belief, didn't he promise Noah that that wouldn't happen again?
Right. Yeah, that's a good one. Or, you know, recently this whole Armageddon, rapture thing, it's like a thief in the night. Did I not read that right? Like, no one knows. No one knows, right?
Well, to be fair, that's not a Christian thing. That's that one guy thing.
Yeah, but there's plenty of rapture preaching, though. I mean, there's plenty. I mean, you turn cable TV on, which is awesome at 4 a.m. Jack Vanimpe presents. I love this guy. He's got like Jack. I think Van Imp is Van Impey. Yeah, just the Wikipedia photo for TV preacher. You know, he's just got the white hair kind of back, and he's got this wife, Rexella Vanimpe, which just is the best name. It's like a dragon's name, you know. It's like that should be in some quest somewhere. And she's getting thinner and younger, which is very creepy. And if you look at her too long, you just sort of your soul starts to melt a little bit, you know. But yeah, they've been preaching end times forever, you know. But it's selective quote mining. Pretty much for any quote that you can find, you know, that says one thing within the Bible, there's almost always the exact opposite. You know, where if you are talking about, you know, Leviticus saying man does not lie with man, you can say, well, like 3 lines further down, it says you're not supposed to eat shrimp either. Like literally, that's like there, you know, or you're not supposed to combine cotton and linen. You know, so like maybe we can let the gay thing slide just a little bit, you know, like be cool with it. Or the fact that, you know, Christ himself contradicts, you know, by saying love everybody, but then take up swords, you know. So it's a weird thing.
That's a metaphor.
Yes. What is it? Julia Sweeney. Julia Sweeney. If you're not familiar with Julia Sweeney, I'm sure everybody is. Julia Sweeney used to be on Saturday Night Live. She has a great one-woman show and film and book. It's called Letting Go of God. She was a Catholic, raised a Catholic, and she does this thing where she kind of re-examined her faith, and upon really reading the Bible, that's what made her lose her faith. And she sort of says that, you know, Jesus keeps teaching in metaphors that are really confusing. And it's like, stop using metaphors. Like if your students aren't understanding what you're saying, stop using metaphors. Like just explain what you mean. I highly recommend it. It's a great thing also, if you are in a position to debate with someone or someone that's a relative of someone, send them to Julia Sweeney, because it's just so moving and touching and smart and done in such a caring way. And she wants to believe, but her logical brain won't let her. And to see that struggle, it's really heartening. It's really cool.
It's very sweet.
Very sweet. Yeah.
You mentioned she was a former Catholic, and so is Bill Maher. He was raised Catholic, at least. And in the movie Religulous,
yes,
he has 1 or 2 scenes with, I believe, the head of the Vatican Observatory. I don't know. Has anybody seen Religulous?
Right.
And the Catholic, he's portrayed as, you know, quite reasonable.
Sure.
He's saying that he doesn't buy into a lot of the creationism. And so I'm wondering, have you ever had discussions with? Have you ever seen a situation, let me ask, where like a Catholic would be arguing with a Young Earth Creationist?
Oh, geez, I haven't witnessed that, but I always love interfaith arguments. Are always great, because it's like, you know, it's 100 angels on the pin. No, it's 104 angels on the head of a pin. It's like, how could you think it's 100 angels? It's 104. Like, all the evidence shows 104 angels on the pin. Duh. Like, I love that kind of stuff. I was raised Catholic as well. I wonder what that, recovering Catholic is the term. You wonder if there's some kind of sort of, you know, what does Catholic mean? Catholic means all, embracing, you know, so open, you know, yeah. So it's like, it's this weird idea of you know, like Jesuit priests are like really into science and things like that, you know? And yet they bifurcate part of their head, I think, to have the Christ and the God and all that other stuff, which is fine, you know, I would rather deal with the guy from the Vatican who sort of can say, yeah, these are the scientific facts, and you know what, this other stuff, you know, this blood into wine, but it's like, yeah, okay. But yeah, I'm not going to say that the earth is X old, and I think most religious people are like that. I think most humans are like that. They can hold two concepts in their head at the same time. And one provides maybe a little bit of familial and historical comfort, you know, that connects them with their culture, connects them with their history, connects them with their family. There's nothing wrong with that. When that starts influencing the rational part of the brain, that's when I get a problem. And when it starts influencing policies, that's when I have a problem. And influencing where the money goes, that's when I start having a problem. You know, Martin Gardner is another perfect example of, like, you know, one of the smartest guys ever who just said, yeah, I believe because it provides comfort for me, and it's ridiculous, but it provides comfort, so screw you. Like, I like that. Like, okay, you're copying to it and you're cool with that, so yeah.
The only thing I wanted to comment is I had a discussion. I'm Catholic, Roman Catholic, and I had a discussion with Christians. And I was horrified to discover that Catholics are not considered Christian.
Yeah.
Huh?
Right. Yeah. It depends. Yeah, it depends. I mean, the whole, like, you know, Vatican is the tail of the dragon, which is the seventh sign of the thing. Yeah.
Evolution and,
right.
And they don't believe in all this stuff.
Yeah, I think a very small percentage of people, religious people, are hardcore 6,000 years. You know, they tend to get the press. They tend to have the TV shows and the websites and all the money. Like, I don't know where, like, the Creation Science Museum has like this $40 million budget or something, which is all from church raising stuff. So it's like, it's great. There's a great film called Flight of the Dodo. Is that what? Flight of the Dodos, yeah, which again shows, like, compares budgets. You know, science education versus what churches have or like the Creation Museum science. Great little film. Check that out as well. Yes?
Oh, I'd just like to recommend a very funny song called Creation Science 101
Okay.
by Roy Zimmerman.
Roy Zimmerman, sure, absolutely. And speaking of funny songs, there's a performance I'm doing tonight. I have a live podcast at 9, thank you, 9 o'clock at somewhere, I think it's upstairs. And then in the Frankie and Vinny's Con Suite, which is right across from where the opening ceremonies are, I have a band coming tonight, a trio, from 10:30 to midnight we're playing. So please come to that. That should be lots of fun. We have a couple songs that deal with these very issues, as a matter of fact. So yeah. Any other questions or comments or anything? Yeah.
I just wanted to make a comment. Levitical law, the defense that you mount, it doesn't work very well with a lot of Christians who are more schooled because Paul repeals 90% of Levitical law, except the gay thing.
Yeah, right. I know. Like, and all of a sudden, this food is safe.
Yeah,
you know.
so
But again, it's like,
if you were aware of that.
no, yeah, I know. And they'll say that, oh, well, Jesus made that food safe, and so that Jesus, you know, when Jesus' blood changed all those rules and all that kind of. And it's like, yeah, okay, but so then that was wrong. So that was like you can just you can change the rules. Like, then what about all those, you know, hundreds of thousands or whatever people that then are sent to hell because they didn't follow? Oh yeah, right.
I didn't think Jews believe in hell.
Jews?
You were saying that if they you know, ate shrimp or whatever, break
Right.
those rules.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, Levitical rule is there's a kosher overlap, if I understand it correctly and stuff. But if you're saying that the Bible is an inerrant word of God, and you say except for this error and this error, which is different because this guy said this other thing over here, like that right away you go, well, okay, and science, you know, all the time is saying this is what we think is going on. As far as we can tell, this is what we think is going on. Whereas faith says this is what is going on. And that's what bugs me, where it's like, okay, so maybe there's some other, you know, maybe Paul had some other thing he wanted to change, you know, like that, who knows what. But I mean, it opens up many more questions than it answers. You know, something like that. I totally get the argument. But again, with a true believer, you won't be able to convince them, you know, other way.
not to be defensive, but as a recovering Jew, there's a distinction I think a lot of people of New Testament beliefs don't understand, is that in Judaism there's a separation of rules. There's rules that are kind of like man-to-man and earthbound rules, and then there's the ones with God, and things like kashrut, kosher, and stuff like that is separate. There's no huge long-term condemnation penalty for things like that. That's sort of a different category.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's more like you shouldn't if you...
those are meant to be practical.
Oh, okay.
There's a safety thing. Like you don't eat like pork because it wasn't safe.
Right, trichinosis and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, sure, absolutely. But all that kind of stuff. Most religious rules at their core, I would think, there's a sense to them, and to reinforce them, you have to have the scary guy in the sky that's going to say, don't sleep with your daughter, unless of course you're Noah and the other guy, the Lot. Thank you. Yes, Lot. Which is I would never drive by a big Lot's story. I was thinking, oof, crazy. All right. Yes.
Since you've become sort of a famous atheist,
world famous.
Do you find you pursue these sort of debates, or do they fall into your lap, or do you try to stay away from them?
Oh, if they're in the guise of a conversation, I love it to bits, and it doesn't often happen at the kind of conventions I go to, because normally, for the most part, it's we're all on the same team here for the most part. Especially like if I go to a TAM or something like that, or a Nexus, which is really a skeptical conference. Here it might happen a little bit more, and here the debates are more often in the fantastic realm of like conspiracy theories and things like that, which is its own bunch of fun, and you use the similar part of your brain to kind of argue those as well, for or against, the same idea of like, okay, if that's true, then, or like this one anomaly, since that's my time, this one anomaly doesn't cancel out everything else. An anomaly is just that, an anomaly, and it's fun. I mean, it's mental ping pong to a certain degree, and I enjoy it. I get lots of emails that have, my brother said this, or my teacher said this, or my friend said that. Like, what should I? And that's, I'm really honored and touched that people want to know what I think, which is kind of cool. So, all right, awesome. Thank you very, very much, and have a great con.